Thessalonians chapter number 2. Now we are on lesson number 3, correct?
Yeah. Page 23. Yes.
Yes, page 23.
Yeah.
Alright, so we're going to start out with verse number 17 and read 17 through chapter 3 and verse 5. And then we're going to come back and start going over it. So we're going to pick up in verse 17. But we, brethren, being taken from you for a short time in presence, not in heart, endeavored the more abundantly to see your face with great desire. Wherefore, we would have come unto you, even I, Paul, once and again, but Satan hindered us. For what is our hope, our joy, our crown of rejoicing? Are not even ye in the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ that is coming? For ye are our glory and joy. Wherefore, when we could no longer forbear, we thought it good to be left at Athens alone, and sent Timothy, our brother and minister of God, and our fellow laborer in the gospel of Christ, to establish you, and to comfort you concerning your faith, that no man should be moved by these afflictions, for yourselves know that we are appointed thereunto. For verily, when we were with you, we told you before that we should suffer tribulation, even as it came to pass, and ye know. For this cause, when I could no longer forbear, I sent to know your faith, lest by some means the tempter have tempted you, and our labor be in vain. Now, what's the first thing that you think about when you're driving down the road and you see a detour sign?
You see a what?
A detour.
Oh, yeah. I think of road work or a bridge out, you know, something.
Some kind of trouble.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Of course, I live out where bridges have washed out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm out from the farm, so I'm used to that.
So have you ever been taking a detour, turned out in a better way than having gone straight?
Yes. In traveling, if you take a detour, sometimes it sends you up a road with some really pretty antebellum homes or
Yep.
something. You get to see farmland, and I'd rather have that as the zippity zip of the traffic.
So sometimes detours in life will allow us to see and experience and be involved in that we never thought we would before. Never even thought about taking place. So not all detours are bad. And that's kind of what Paul is saying here as he's speaking to the Thessalonians. He wants to go and be with them, but there's been some detours. He wants to go and visit with them to check on how they're doing, but there's been some barriers that have been put up. And you know, a lot of times we can relate that to our Christian walk. There's things that we want to do, to go, things we want to experience, but it seems like there's just a barrier that keeps popping up. There's an obstacle. There's something that routes us around and causes us to go in a new direction. And you know, sometimes we realize that those are positive experiences. Sometimes the Lord puts those in our path to help us to grow, mature, to teach us things that we wouldn't learn any other way because we like just doing the things that we know. Wisdom knows that there's going to be things that take place that we need to experience so that we can be a stronger or a more mature Christian. Now, in the first part of this chapter, in chapter number 1 even, Paul wrote to them, and if you'll recall, he mentioned that the success that they had had when they were there. He meant that they were growing and their motives were pure. The workers, they weren't there to get anything from them, but they were only trying to help them. And he wanted to show them that his reasons for coming was to share with them the gospel, and that was his only reason. He wanted to see them sure in the knowledge of their faith and their walk with the Lord. Now, Paul, as we just got through, he mentions here that his heart's desire is to be with them again. Now, anybody remember why he had to leave them the first time? What caused him to have to leave the first time he went to Thessalonica? I think Wayne read that at Acts, I think it's somewhere in chapter 7, that the Jews kind of rioted, and so Paul had to flee, and they went to Athens. And you notice we read, I think in chapter number 3 of this one, that he said that he was going to stay at Athens alone. But he, because of persecution, had to leave them. And he was letting them know that even though I have to leave, you're still on my heart, you're still on my mind. And you know, there are Christians that do a work, that share the gospel. And you know, I get letters and emails and stuff like that. There's one that he emails me about every month, every other month. How's the church doing? How's the people in the church? How's the work going? You know, that lets you know that we are still on his mind. That he's not just thinking about what we can do for him, but he wants to know what I can pray for. What can I do for y'all? Somebody in our life, actually there should be more than one person in our life that we have on our heart in such a way. And you see, that's where Paul was. He had them on his heart because he knew that he didn't get to spend as much time with them as he wanted to teach them and help them in their growth. So he's letting them know that you're still on my mind. I'm lifting you up in prayer. He didn't want them to think that he had abandoned them, because he himself is their spiritual father. And he saw them as his spiritual children. And the Jews, the ones that were against him, wouldn't allow him to return. And so he knew what it was like to face that kind of opposition. Now, anybody remember where Paul was at before he came to Thessalonica? In his missionary journey, anybody remember where he was before? You know, bad part about asking that question is I forgot. I had that on my mind before we came here, where he was at before. Anyway, wherever he was at before, he had been beaten. And so it was still a struggle for him, because they could see the things that he had been through, and now he's being run out again. But now, not only was he facing the barriers that were put up by the Jews and the obstacles that he was facing from them, but Satan had thrown up hindrances to him. Look at verse number 18. He says, "Wherefore we would have come unto you, even, but Satan hindered us." So he's telling them that twice I would have come. I was planning the trip to come to you. But he said, but Satan hindered us. Now, in what ways do you think Satan could have hindered Paul? In what ways can Satan hinder an individual?
People against him, I mean, you know, he was abused, so they were, I guess, like some of our riots and our things that's going on now, they were opposed to him, and they let everybody know that they were opposed to him.
So Satan can use individuals. Now, we realize that anybody that's lost can be, and even people that are saved, but more often than not, people die and persuaded by the workings and the, I guess, motivations of Satan. So what are some other ways that Satan could have hindered Paul? Not just by using other people, but what?
He could have been in jail.
Yep.
Illness.
Illness.
Storms.
Huh?
Storms.
Storms.
All kinds of ways.
Now, do you think Satan controls the weather?
It
Huh?
seems like it, doesn't
It seems like it.
it? Those tornadoes
Yeah.
It seems like it, but, I don't know if he could or not, I don't know.
He's the prince and power of the air. He able to control the storm. But it would seem like it.
We've had some rough enough that is, and some people have been hit, 2 or 3 times within a couple of years, and Florida was hit, some of the same people within 2 weeks of each other
Yeah.
with the flood and all the stuff, so,
Yeah. You think about the church burning and the tornado coming.
yeah.
I remember an instance in the Bible though, where it speaks like Satan had any influence over the weather, but I don't know.
Well, what about Paul personally?
Discouraged.
Yeah. Discouragement, temptations even. Now we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, but Satan is able to put temptations in front of us. You see, that's one of the things that Paul is going to be talking to Thessalonians about. Is not Paul, he was not even immune. Now he doesn't tell us what it is, so all we're doing is speculating, but we're looking at it from a standpoint of how Satan could influence us and keep us from going to someone else or helping someone else. Temptations. He could put those and get us distracted. Work that we're involved in, activities that we're involved in, people that we're involved with. You see, he can use us from doing and going and helping and reaching others and helping them in their Christian walk. So he didn't give the details of his barriers, but Paul had to flee from the last place, had to flee from them, and now he's in Athens and he's reaching back out to them. So Satan works in whatever way he can to slow the progress of the gospel. Now we have to go about our daily walk with that realization. He's going to do whatever he can to slow your Christian walk. So whether it's in a mission field as a missionary or whether it's in a local church, he's going to do whatever he can to stop us from trying to share the gospel, from trying to do the things that we feel like the Lord is leading us to do. There may be a lot of things. There may be a lot of hindrances that are being thrown up in front of us because, by all rights and reasons, the church should be finished by now. But yet we're still facing one barrier, one obstacle. It's nothing big, but there's still one right after another, after another, after another. And Satan found ways to hinder Paul from coming, and he may have very well found ways for us to be bogged down, if you will. That's what Paul is doing to encourage. That's what that missionary is doing to encourage. He's continually reminding us that there are people that care about us. There are people that are praying for us. There are people that are lifting us up to the Lord, that we might, just as Paul is trying to encourage them, to carry on. Now, Paul, even in spite of all these obstacles, he knew that there could be success in the ministry that he had started in Thessalonica. Timothy, he sent him to go and to work with them. Now, when he finished his earthly ministry, he mentions down here, crown of rejoicing. Let's see. I read that somewhere. Where was that at? Right in verse number 19. For what is our hope, our joy, our blessing? Are not even ye in the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ at his coming? Now, Paul referred, this is a crown of rejoicing. This is, anybody know what the crown of rejoicing is referred to? In Paul's writing right here, what do you think he's meaning when he's speaking about the crown of rejoicing?
Those that he led to the Lord.
Being able to rejoice in those that he's led to the Lord. Rejoice in the growth, the spiritual growth that he sees in those that have accepted Christ. Seeing the rejoicing that he is experiencing as he watches those that he is teaching grow in their spiritual walk for the Lord. Now, in those instances, that is going to be a crown that he will receive at the judgment seat of Christ. So when he mentions crown to these Thessalonians, one of the first things that's going to pop in their mind, because he uses, I believe it's, the Greek word is diadem. It's a crown that a winner of a contest or a race would receive as they celebrate their victory. And so that's basically what Paul is telling them that we're doing. We're celebrating the victory that you have in your spiritual walk. Now, anybody about other crowns in the New Testament? Anybody know what the other crowns are? Anybody know how many there are?
5?
There's 5. 5 crowns that an individual can receive when they stand before Jesus at the judgment seat. Anybody know? We got the crown of rejoicing. Anybody know another one?
No. Crown of righteousness is one of them.
Crown of righteousness is one of them. So there's a crown of rejoicing, crown of righteousness,
Crown of life.
crown of life is the third one,
Crown of glory.
crown of
Did I already say crown of life?
yes.
Okay, got it again there. Guess it's more on it. What's the other one? Is it crown of salvation? I don't know.
There is a soul winner's. We'll stand before him at the judgment seat to be judged for the things done in this body, whether good or bad. And at that judgment, we'll either suffer reward or suffer loss. The reward will be the presenting of the crowns. Now, these are things that we have done for the glory of Jesus. And I believe it's going to be another opportunity to lay these at his feet. I don't know where that came from in my mind, but I've read or heard that somewhere, that we will be laying these down at his feet. Any questions about the crowns before we move on? Now, Paul had just about had it as much as he could stand about what was going on with the Thessalonians without getting a report. So we've talked about that he sent Timothy there. So, why do you think Paul is so deeply concerned about the Thessalonians and their spiritual walk? What would make him so concerned about their spiritual walk that they're constantly on his mind? You know, have you ever had one of your children move away, or somebody that you love dearly move away and you don't know what's going on? You're just kind of left wondering. These people were dear to him. And he didn't get to spend enough time with them to start with because he was ran out. He was ran out of town. So he knows that these temptations, these barriers, these roadblocks, these detours that are going to be popping up in their life because they are so young in the Lord, that there's going to be more opportunity to get frustrated and quit. Have you ever been in that spot where you felt like just throwing up your hands and saying, what's the use?
Lots of times.
Not just in our spiritual walk, is it? Sometimes it's in everyday practice. We just get so frustrated with that we can't accomplish what we want to accomplish. Because there's things that happen to us, and it can be things that are mental, things that are physical, that are spiritual. But we get to that point where we just struggling to keep going. Well, you imagine someone that's new to a task, and then you say, well, here's what you need to do. You need to get started. And them being new to that task, they don't have all the information. It's like telling somebody, when we were at that conference this past week, we went to one of the speakers got up and he was telling the story about one of his lifelong desires was to fly an airplane. He said when he was working at a construction job and one would fly over, he'd tell everybody, I'm going to be up there driving that one day. And he moved to Tupelo, and the airport wasn't that far away, so he went to the airport and he asked them and started talking to them about getting lessons and how much and all of this. And he said if he got all of the information, he talked to one of the instructors, and so he went back and he scraped up enough money for a lesson, and he went back up there, and the instructor that he talked to wasn't there. So he talked to the lady at the desk, and she hollered down, and there was two other guys down there, and she said, one of you guys got time to give him a lesson? And so one of them said, yeah. He said, I've got time. And he walked up, shook his hand, and he said, all right, let's get out there and let's go get in the plane. So they get out to the plane. They do a walk around, true story. They do a walk around inspection. He gets in. He says, okay, run her up. And he said, I looked at him like I didn't know. And he said, I know you must be nervous. He said, here, do this, 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 this. And he said, I did all those things. And he said, all right, so let's fire her up. And he said, I looked at him. He thought, I don't know what's going on. This must be a really advanced course if they're putting me in it and he wants me to fire it up already. And he said, I fired her up and we started jumping and bucking and the guy starts yelling, brakes, brakes. And so I hit the brake and then he said, okay. He said, well, let's taxi on down the runway. And he said, I was thinking taxi. He said, I'm moving already. This is my first lesson. He said, this must be really advanced. And so he said, we taxied down the runway, and he said, get her lined up, and I lined it up, and he said, all right, let her rip. And I didn't know. He said, I felt like I was about to have a heart attack. I didn't know what in the world I was doing, but he said, I shoved that thing just as far forward as it would go, and we started zooming down there, and he said, the runway seemed so wide, but he said, by the time we were close to the end, he said, it seemed so narrow. He said, and the guy said, all right, lift her off. And he said, pull her back. And so I pulled back, and he said, we shot straight up. And he said, nose down, nose down. He said, I went all the way forward, and we started nosing down. He said, pull up, pull up. And he said, I started yanking. He said, we did like this for a little bit until we got settled out. And he said, after we got settled out, he said, set your heading on so-and-so. But he pointed, so I started going that way. And he said, after we was up there for a few minutes, the instructor said, you mind if I smoke? And I said, no. And he said, so how long you been flying? He said, I told him this is my first lesson. He said, the instructor spit the cigarette out and says, what in the world are we doing? And so he said that sometimes in life you get thrown into situations without the proper preparation. And without the proper preparation, it can seem overwhelming. And that's a lot about what we are as young Christians. We can get thrown into a situation. That's what Paul was concerned about. These Thessalonians had been thrown into a situation where they didn't have the proper preparation. And as a young Christian, we're excited about the work. We want to share what Jesus has done for us. And we can go into situations that we're not quite prepared for. But as we grow and mature, he said eventually he got his pilot's license. He I think he said he got to where he could even fly a jet or something like that. But he was finally prepared. And so then when those new instructions came or an obstacle came up, as a more mature pilot, he could handle those situations better. And we, as a more mature Christian, when we see that detour, when we see that barrier or that roadblock, we're not as apt to get frustrated, we're not as apt to panic, and we're more able to, assess the situation and respond in a way that will help us to carry on the work. Now, Paul was worried because they were immature. Is that plain? Okay. Paul was worried because they were mature, that something would come up in their walk that they wouldn't know what to do. Now, anybody remember the Corinthians? That was a church that got started, And after they got started, they didn't have proper leadership. And because they didn't have proper leadership, they were going in all different kinds of directions. So every single chapter in 1 Corinthians, Paul is writing to them to correct some doctrinal error that they have strayed away from, because they weren't mature enough to handle everything on their own. You see, I kind of think Paul, he had a lot of learning to do as he was going too. Because after he surrendered, he was taught, and then he starts going out and going to other cities and starting churches. So he had a learning curve there also. And so, we can realize and learn from Paul's experience there that we need to be more settled, we need to be calmer, we need to be more steadfast, and we need to make sure that we don't allow the temptations to come in and lead us astray. Any questions or comments? Verse number 3 of chapter 3. Paul says that no man should be moved by these afflictions, for yourselves know that we are appointed thereunto. Now in the lesson, that word moved, it was a word that they used to, I think, describe the wagging of a dog's tail. When you see a dog wagging its tail, what do you think? What kind of attitude do you think the dog has?
Have a good attitude.
Pretty good attitude.
Friendly, kind of.
Friendly. And he's using that moved to reference the temptations that Satan will put before you. He says that wagging tail makes you think that there's something positive, something good, something that can help you or entertain you. And he's speaking about those afflictions. Those are the things that Satan throws out there. So he's saying, beware lest you give in to that. Now, I saw a friend of mine, and he told me the other day, he said, I suffered from your misfortune. And I said, what happened? He said, I got bit by a German Shepherd too.
Oh.
You see, I went into a motorhome, and the guy said, you can't even consider that thing a dog. He's more human-like. You don't have anything to worry about. And I put my hand up there, and he bit me. And he said that this German Shepherd was there. It was wagging its tail, and it was at the end of its leash. And he said, I reached out to pet it, and he said, but it wasn't quite at the total end of its leash. He said he had about that much more room to go. And he got him on the wrist, deep. He said it was about a week and a half ago, and it was still looked like an open wound. And this was at his house. This was his in-laws. His son's in-laws had brought their dog over. So you never know. Sometimes that thing that is so inviting can lead you to, some harmful results. And that's what Paul was warning them about. Let's see. Let's go to 1 Thessalonians chapter 3 and verse 5. He says, for this cause, when I could no longer forbear, I sent to know your faith, lest by some means the tempter have tempted you, and our labor be in vain. Now, that tempter, anybody know who he's talking about as the tempter? Satan, that's exactly right. Paul repeatedly faced the tempter, and he understood that constant lure to be led astray, to give up, to throw up your hands, and he knew that they would be, as we've talked about before, that they would be vulnerable to that. And I like the way that he says this. He said, when I could no longer forbear, he said, when I couldn't stand it any longer, he said, I had to know what was going on there with you. And, somebody that is more mature in Christ has a better understanding of the relentlessness of Satan's attacks on them. We know that he's not going to ever give up. And the closer that we walk with the Lord, then the more that he is going to attack us. And we can realize that, the only real strength or hope that we can have is to have an even closer walk with the Lord. Now, Satan, he's going to come at us in 3 different ways. The first way, and this is on the bottom of page 28, he brings persecution on believers. He tempts them to give up, and he calls those that give up worthless failures. Now, have you ever thought about when you actually give in to a temptation? Does Satan ease up on you? If you give in to a temptation, does Satan ease up on you? Usually no. He's usually whispering in your ear, you've done messed up, you can never go back. You've gone too far, you can't get that right again. You'll never regain trust. You'll never get your testimony back. Your reputation is destroyed. He never really relents because he wants to do everything possible to slow down, to hinder, or to harm the gospel as it goes out. So, Timothy, what does he report back? When he gets there, he reports back that they've successfully resisted Satan's temptation to quit. Or in other words, they're still working. And Satan, he's still going to work on us. If we fail, he's going to be on us just as hard, telling us that we can never get back to where we were. But the great thing about it is, Jesus forgives. He's the God of second chances. Now, Paul, don't miss in this how concerned he was for the other Christians around him. They were on his heart. His desire was to see them grow, to see them mature. And that's the same type of concern that we should have for those around us. We should be concerned when they struggle. We should be concerned in the temptations that they face. So when we go out, just like that missionary that emails me, think about those that are around you, in your church family, in your extended family. Let them know that you're thinking about them, that you're praying about them, that you're concerned with their walk for the Lord. Any word or comment from anybody? This is going to be an illustration for the sermon. So I'm going to give you a hint now. It's either how many or how much. Y'all can figure out the rest.